Hey guys, we're here at the underground gorge. What's up, Kentucky? The coolest place in the gorge. We're here at the underground cave, classic tours. We're gonna go on a boat tour here soon. Should be pretty fun. It looks like they blasted a hole in the side of the boat. Huge difference. You can feel the cold air rushing off of the mine. And we got this helmet on. It smells really bad. We're headed down deep into the mine, and this is where we're gonna be hopping onto our boat. Here you can see all the kayaks. It's a big, giant, massive cave. Here's these magnificent boats we're about to get on. All right, guys, we're hopping on the boat here. We're going to be taking a seat.
Everything you see on the walls, the ceiling, everything below, it's all limestone. This was AMC that did this in 1965. This itself is a limestone mine, all limestone, all man-made. 100 years ago, it was nothing but the mountain here until they came in and cut, blasted, drilled, and formed these 5 acres of hallways and tunnels. And everything you see on the wall, the ceiling, it's all limestone. Everything you ever taken out is limestone. And they took as much as they possibly could while leaving these columns intact below the ceiling as they worked further and further into this. And this started because in 1965 they built the Mountain Parkway. And this is where all the gravel roadways to build that 285-mile segment were sourced from. They were down here for 30 years, blasting limestone, crushing the gravel, building it. They hit an aquifer pretty early on in the project. A few years in, they tapped into it. And there's a lot of water that runs through these mountains and cracks. And considering this is a 5-acre footprint and they only hit it in one spot, that's pretty good. But all it took was that one to fill it up. I'll show you where that's coming in now. The limestone, it's high alkaline, that used to be used in distilled. If you're going to make bourbon and label it Kentucky bourbon, that water actually had to be sourced out of limestone. Right? Now everything's run through reverse osmosis. This place is shaped like a giant waffle fry. There's 87 columns holding up the ceiling. Of the 5 acres down here, 3 are flooded with water. We're going to make a big loop and go around the perimeter. Anytime you look left, you're looking inside the mine, between the columns. It's about a quarter of a mile if you want to cut through the middle. Anytime you look right, you're looking at a dead-end room like this one. Now, they couldn't have gone any further right here. They would have been outside again. That's the side of the mine right there. And you can see this pin that was left behind back here. This is plowed. This was all formed. They would drill in, pull the pin, put some dynamite in, and blast off another section of the wall. There's always 40 feet between the ceiling and the floor all throughout the mine. But it's all sloped down. I hope you got bats in there. So our bats come down here and hibernate. And in another month or two, you'll see thousands of bats on the walls. So if you see something flying, that's a bat. And that's a brand new arrival here this year. But because there's always 40 feet between the ceiling and the floor, because it all slopes down, you'll notice that as we get deeper in here, we're floating closer and closer to the surface of the ceiling. And the water's going to be brought that, and it gets up to about 40 feet deep at the deepest point. These reflections you see on the ceiling and the walls are a type of bacteria. And they live in cold, wet, dark environments, mines and caves. It takes 50 years of undisturbed growth for these colonies to start to be visible like this. And they can be white, gold, silver, yellow, green, depends what they're eating, cranking the limestone. Anywhere you see this is because we're pretty close to the outside, near the surface, and the ceiling stays a little wet all the time. As you can hear and you can see up there, that's where they hit the aquifer. And they knew they were close. They turned the whole project 90 degrees here before. They had guys on top of wood sticks down below trying to find this stuff. You can see this wall behind you, it's still packed together. And this is where 99% of the water here comes from. It's been flowing nonstop for 7 years. Now that happened early in the project, and they had to spend 20 years pumping this place every day to keep it drying and continue mining out there. When they left in 1985, they let it fill in. Right. Some of these walls, you can see the high water mark. That happens early spring, we hit a high tide. And all summer, the trees pull water out of the aquifer. It brings us down about 2 feet. So we're still receding. Sometime early winter, and then the trees go dormant, that will reverse and we'll go up again. We hit the same high and low at the same time each year with no input from us. 50 million gallons of water in here. You see where it comes in. The only way that water leaves is to reabsorb back in this rock and continue traveling underground. So this still doesn't see daylight. The ceiling was stained black from 30 years of mining activities, blasting, diesel smoke, fumes. That's what gives it this color. Anywhere you see some nice white stone, that's where a big piece of the ceiling has fallen in more recently. That probably won't happen today. Catch a rock on the story. Yeah. This limestone is 1 billion years old, twice as old as the Appalachian Mountains themselves. So it did some cracking and pushing as all that formed, you know, but there's entire slabs that are still, you know, in their original whole pieces. Spot some of our fish hanging out by these lights here.
Oh,
This is supposed to be my next question.
What kind of fish are you?
So these are rainbow trout, and these are probably some of the biggest rainbow trout you've ever seen. We've got some fish in here 30 inches long. This one or two, it's different species, like this one here. That's not they seem to be doing good. Those are not coming out of this mine.
Wow.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Imported, I think, Amarillo trout. It's not Amarillo. Those are the yellow ones you see. It's another species of trout. But anything big in here is a rainbow trout because the last 2 times we stocked it, the last 10 years, that's all we've been having. So there's some new thumbs around. 5 to 7 years in these conditions. They can live a little longer in the wild, but all of our fish make it to adulthood. There's no predators in here. They're given 5 pounds of shrimp pellets every day. There's no natural food source. We used to let you guys feed the fish as part of the tours where I'll throw some food. And we actually had some people knock off this boat because they're very aggressive feeders. They start jumping out of the water, flying over the boats. The insurance company said no more. I'm just kidding. We don't have insurance, but we did have some people who knocked off this boat and stopped paying attention. Now we put the lights in here for the fish. You can take adult trout, put them in the dark, cold water. They do just fine. But if they reproduce, the babies are born without eyes entirely. They turn that gene off in 1 generation if there's not a light source during development. And ours don't spawn under these conditions. We've never had that problem. There's no seasonality in here. You wouldn't know what month or season you're in. And the fish don't either. So anytime we want some new ones, we have to restock.
The temperature doesn't change that much in winter.
Not at all. 40 degrees in the water, 55 in the air all the time. The only thing you would observe is a little bit of tide change if you do what you're looking at there. Now these rocks on the bottom, this is what the limestone looked like at this stage of the process. This is after it's blasted off the wall. And they'd circle a column like this, making it more and more narrow. And when they had 30 feet of material piled up here, they would take it out front, crush it, and gravel. And this would head for the parkway. They finished that road in 1985. This was all just left waiting for pickup. Notice we're getting a little closer to the ceiling now. You got about 35 feet of water below you in this channel. And they sloped this whole thing down so that if they hit gas back here somewhere, it would rise towards the entrances and not accumulate in a pocket on the ground. This rock's been underwater for 70 years. And you can see it's still spotless. There's no sediment or any kind of growth. We're like a refrigerator in here. It's 55 degrees in the air year round. There's no sunshine or photosynthesis. It's a very sterile environment. That and the alkaline water keeps it very clean. You absolutely could. There's fish living in the water, so I mean we don't encourage you, but I go out of the water. This is very, very clean. Yeah. Up ahead here, it looks like you're seeing the bottom in some areas, and that's all just reflection off the ceiling. You can see all the columns are perfectly mirrored. We got 40 feet of water below us now. This is the deepest room in the mine. On a good day in the wintertime, our best visibility in this water is about 20-25 feet. So we've never seen the bottom of this room. We don't know what's down here. Not since it filled up in the 80s. And that's true for more than 50% of this place. You You guys are welcome to touch the ceiling. Go for it. That's about as close to it as we'll get back in here.
That's close.
And if you touch the ceiling, your hand will smell like fresh cut grass or like you've been digging in the soil. That's anaerobic bacteria in the limestone. They don't need sunlight or oxygen. They metabolize the nitrates and ammonia in this rock. That'll be the first thing we find on Mars. Now at this point here, this is the deepest into the mountain that they got on the entire project. You guys were in the parking lot looking inside of this one. We've come in a third of a mile, and the mountain's been going up around us. So you got 300 feet of material above you now. It's about the center of the mountain. Glencairn Road's up there. How far back did you say go? Third of a mile. When you look at the walls here, this limestone, this is the grade A primo stuff. This is the purest limestone you'll ever see. It's thick, white, smooth, clean, homogeneous. From this point on, we start getting closer to the outside. If you watch the walls, you'll see the limestone becomes more discolored, more crumbly, and more you'll see gray mixed in, which is shale. There's always a ratio of shale. This is soot from the mining days, the operation. But you see what the walls look like. That's the limestone. And as you start seeing more gray in the mixture, that's shale. There's always a ratio of shale and limestone. If you hit too high of a shale content, you can't continue mining underneath it, inside it like this, because it's much more brittle. Now, all limestone started forming about 1 billion years ago. They're not making any more of it. At that time, the world was covered in shallow seas, and all life was in those seas. There was nothing on land, no dinosaurs, no insects yet, no plants even. Everything in the ocean, corals, sponges, and vertebrates had a shell made of calcium. All that calcium material ended up on the bottom. That was the only thing down there. Trillions of tons of water pressure, millions of years compressed and formed this 300-foot thick band of sedimentary limestone, which is essentially pure calcium, a little magnesium mixed in. Our Appalachian Mountains, 500 million years ago, those popped up, but this has been here much longer. Right. And 99% of Kentucky is sedimentary rock. And you got your limestone, you got beds, all the waterfalls, that's a conglomerate sandstone. But this area, before it was mountains, it was shallow ocean for a long time. Now, I've seen a couple bats flying around today, so I'm looking here because when they start landing on the walls, this will be the first room they do, and this is our main bat cave. We'll have hundreds, if not thousands, of bats lined up on these walls, and this will be the first place we see them. We do, oh yeah. We're here all winter. We'll get right on the flashlights. They're in a deep hibernative state. They don't move. They don't come in and out. They don't make any waste. They don't eat until April, when the days get a little longer, a little more light trickles in here, and you know it's time to go back up to the forest. And we'll get our Appalachian big-eared bats primarily, but we also get Indianas, which are endangered. And Indianas form big clusters, so there'll be hundreds all hanging on top of each other. So that's how we can tell which species is which. You see how dark it gets back here. We've put a lot of lights down here, but this is still the darkest little pocket of the mine, and that's why the bats come into this area. They can see that gradient. Now, out in the gorge in the winter, it can be grueling. It can be below zero, with snow and ice on the ground, the wind's blowing, and it feels just like this in January, which is why the bats choose to hibernate here. And this is a man-made environment that's less than 100 years old, but they're adapting to it. Every year they come back, they bring some friends, and we get bigger and bigger numbers. We've lost power down here before. We've lost power to boats, lights, it's all exciting. Now it's getting back. Now we're getting closer to the outside. There's about 200 feet of material above us. You can see when you look at the walls, the limestone becomes more discolored, more crumbly, and more you see those gray striations of shale around here. Over here you've got entire pockets of pure shale. We call this one the chimney. And we call this one the dope. When the miners would hit these shale pockets in the walls, they would stop, back away, and go a different direction because they didn't know how deep these pockets went. We still don't know. And a big one could bring the whole place down. It's a very brittle rock. Once it's exposed to air, it just disintegrates. You can see this column up ahead where the whole center collapses, big shale pocket. So they rerouted. They went right and left around that instead of burrowing into it. And that's how most of this was designed. If you're wondering how these hallways were laid out, engineered, that happened in real time down here as they would encounter shale. and make a 90-degree turn. Like you see, there's a shale pile at the end of each of these hallways. They make a 90-degree turn, try and get back into the limestone again. If they couldn't, they'd abandon the tunnel and start a new one. So about 30 years, this was part of the Parkway project there, under what I'm told the AMC, the American Mining Corporation. And then from what I understand, it's Hinkle that took over the lease, and their only intention was just to make sure that nobody else opened this up as an operational mine. So it costed them nothing to take over the lease. And I don't know if another company came in, you said, was it Whitaker? Walker, right, I'm not sure when. They might have held the lease, but nobody was mining it after the Mountain Parkway project. The guy who bought this, he wanted to build cabins on top. He paid probably about what your car is worth to take over a 100-year lease on this. And the engineers said you can't build on top of this, right? At our store, we don't have running water because we don't have septic because we can't do that in limestone, right? So they told him the same thing when he wanted to build on top. And then they realized locals were sneaking down here with their own kayaks, so we started hiring them to give guided tours, and that's how this started.
So that way in is the only way in or out?
There's two just like that. I'm gonna get you close to the other one, I'll point it out, but it gets a little shallow for this boat. There's two entrances, no other holes, no other caves or chimneys that we know of. Up here on the ceiling, this indentation, this is the best fossil that we have down here. This was discovered entirely by accident. What you're looking at is a prehistoric stream bed. So once upon a time, this was the surface layer, there's blue skies above. This is a stream that meandered down the hillside like you see out in the woods today. But what makes this a unique fossil is in some areas the sediment that was in the bottom of the stream is still here. It's been trapped inside this limestone for 500 million years. Old stream. And most of what was within the oceans back then, at that time period, was pulverized. All the organic material was turned into all this limestone you see around you. But that sediment was preserved, trapped inside the limestone, and to find a sample from this time period that comes from the ocean is very rare. The miners thought this was a taproot. It happens in coal mining where you hit a petrified tree stump or tree root, and that's what they thought this was, a long root that turned to rock. They caused coal mines to collapse, so they're very careful with it. It's a good thing because it was actually National Geographic that found out about this because the pictures you guys post. And they came out here immediately. They knew what this was, how old it was, and they wanted to be the first ones to take samples and see what they could find in that 500 million year old sediment. That's how we got our facts on this one. It ends over here at George Washington. It's in there a little bit. You think something better instead. And this is shale, and this all came out of that hole in the ceiling above it. Now this was the biggest concern the miners had when they were down here, was that they were going to have one of these open up that they didn't know about. When they knew they were here, they demolition them, but sometimes these caught everybody by surprise when that thin veneer limestone caved in and there was nothing but shale behind it. This was a small dump here. This pile goes down about 20 feet, but we've lost whole hallways that are 40 feet tall, 50 feet wide, and instantaneously been filled in bottom to top because one of these opened up and there was enough of that shale material to fill up the volume. Around the entrance, you start to see that bacteria again. There's a little variation, so we know that we're getting close to the outside and the ceiling stays a little wetter all the time. Now this here is coal. If you've never seen coal in the wild, there's a little bit of iron and sulfur mixed in. Now the coal layer is a little higher. They went a little too high here. They got out of the limestone and they got into the coal layer. Coal is all plant-based material. And when this limestone is forming, plants haven't arrived yet. So that comes later and coal just sits on top of the limestone. I think you get a little bit of groundwater that drips through as we're getting close to the sides of the mountain. Again, this ceiling is more permeable. In fact, you'll see some little white sticks hanging off called soda straws, and that happens when groundwater, said groundwater, runs through. So I think anywhere you see that bacteria, it's because we're pretty close to the side of the mountain. You wouldn't have to go too far that way to be outside again, and it's just groundwater that keeps the ceiling moist. Where we were touching the ceiling back there, we're 300 feet down, a third of a mile of the mountain, there's no groundwater getting in there, so you're not going to see that kind of growth. This was the original hallway. This is how they came in. They started at that end, and they made it 1,200 feet in the front straight lines, the longest straight line on the mile. Until they got here, and then they made the first turn. When you look at the limestone here, it's riddled with shale. This is what you see when you're driving along, when they cut away the rock and put a highway in. It's still limestone, but there's very high shale content, which makes this a much more crumbly rock. They were just trying to get through this, get deeper into the mountain, that causes one major collapse. This hole here opened up in the last 60 years. We've had quite a few of the miners that were with this project come back and take our tour, and they're all surprised to see this. This wasn't here at all in their life. You can see on the bottom everything that's been spilling out of that. It's piling out all the rocks and gravel. If you work here, we've all heard, some of us have seen material come out of this hole periodically. And if we get a big dump, we'll close off this corner, not bring a tour through here for a few days, just to see what it's going to do. But it's been pretty quiet in the last couple of weeks. That may be the one that brings this whole place down eventually. It's kind of new and it's evolving quickly. And that's happening because we're getting close to the outside. This is all the side of the mountain again, and you can see that all turns into shell. Apart back in the 60s, early on in the project, they made the decision to pile up this rock, make a barricade, and they abandoned a whole section of line back here. It was no longer viable. Too close to the outside, too much shale, and it started crumbling away. You can walk back there, take a right or a left, and you find another 2 acres of mine chambers, just like these, but you can walk around that whole place, it's all dry. And we can't take it anywhere near it because it's in an active state of collapse. You get sun. I lose this hallway in about 2 weeks, and I have to reroute the tour. I'll get a call, somebody knocked the prop. 30 years of building out smoke melted the ceiling in this one spot. But every bit of that limestone that was removed to form these tunnels and hallways, it went into this machine and it came out gravel. It was gravel formed before it rolled out of here for the first time.
And we just went on the tour of the underground gorge. Definitely recommend everybody come check it out. Super fun time riding this underground gorge boat. As you can see, you go out on this nice, huge metal boat, super safe. You have a tour guide, tells you all about it. That was worth spending $30. I got to see the gorge. We're gonna keep it moving to the next adventure now. See you guys there. What's up, Kentucky? The coolest place. Classic tours.